Hello, I'm Jim McKinley. Welcome to UCC Got Talents. I've chosen to speak to you not as the MC of the talent show, but as the PC. That's right, Pastor of Ceremonies. Given our transition to a new pastor, I want to take a few minutes to explain how that choice need not be so difficult, such a difficult decision. Instead, I offer a compelling case as to why I should be the next settled pastor at Valley Forge. With a lifetime of religious devotion and discernment behind me, I am not the natural, but the supernatural choice for the job. In any search for a settled pastor, you want someone who is truly settled, and that fits me to a T. I live right around the corner. I can walk here faster than most other candidates could find their keys. More importantly, mine has been a remarkable religious journey. Even as a youth, I was deeply religious. As this photo demonstrates, I was surrounded with a halo-like glow that was very unusual for a child my age. I also have a slew of religious bona fides. Over the years, I have been touched, mostly appropriately, by great men of faith like Pope Francis. I only wish the Swiss guards had let me fix my tie before snapping our picture. My religious roots are in the Bronx, a place that continues to evoke deep spiritual feelings within me. My childhood was truly a time when the stories of the Bible seemed so real to me. And why not? The Bronx during that era was more like first century Israel than anywhere else in America, or even Israel for that matter. Yiddish was practically a second language. My neighborhood was filled by people and places that were truly biblical, such as the mighty babe and the house that Ruth built. And there were other, less well-known biblical figures, like Eddie Carmel, the Jewish giant. Here was a man cut from the same cloth as Goliath. No man has ever stood so tall. He was nearly 9 feet. In this photo, taken by photographer Diane Arbus, Eddie towers menacingly over his parents. In real life, Eddie was just a guy from the Bronx who went on a growth spurt that didn't stop. Eddie's dream was to be a stand-up comedian. Honestly, people would say, Eddie, are you kidding? Do you know how small those comedy clubs are? Both Eddie and I also were part of the exodus that swept the Bronx. He and I moved to the same housing development. The apartments there only had 8-foot ceilings. Eddie was so tall he couldn't stand up completely in his own home. Now, Exodus wasn't the one from Bible study, but it was led by Moses. But in this case, it was Robert Moses. Robert Moses was New York's master builder. He's the one that put the empire in Empire State. He built dams, bridges, tunnels, World's Fairs. His crowning achievement, the Cross Bronx Expressway. The Cross Bronx plowed through the single most densely populated community in the country and forced the relocation of thousands and left in its wake a total mess. But Moses led his people to a new promised land, Freedom Land, a failed theme park whose claims to fame were that it was shaped like America and it was bigger than Disneyland. Unlike Disneyland, it wasn't located in Southern California, but the Bronx. People want to go to Southern California. Nobody wants to go to the Bronx, at least not for fun. They especially don't want to go if they have to take the Cross Bronx to get there. So on the site of Freedom Land, Moses built an entirely new city, one of high-rise apartments, where I dwelt among 55,000 others, mostly Jewish. Which meant that Co-op City was more Jewish than Israel. Now, I also received rigorous religious training. For families like mine, who couldn't afford to send their sons to an elite prep school or military academy, but wanted to see them avoid juvenile detention, there was Cardinal Hayes High School for boys. Hayes itself was modeled on other leading institutions like Sing Sing and Eastern State Penitentiary. For that reason, and others, Hayes stood out among the pantheon of Bronx high schools. Hayes was by far and away the coolest. It had the coolest colors. Sure, they may look like red and yellow, but they were cardinal and gold. Hayes men were cool dudes. They had a swagger. In a town full of wise guys, Hayes was considered the city champs. We had classic class clowns like Carlin, Philbin, and Scorsese. Regis loved Hayes so much he earned his varsity letter in brown nosing. Scorsese was another. He was such a big fan of Hayes that both De Niro and Pesci wished they had attended. The faculty was a dedicated crew. Some, like Monsignor Tiffany, were recognized scholars. The students were regularly reminded that Monsignor Tiffany turned down prestigious university positions so he could stay at Hayes and teach young men. Such sacrifice and dedication. Monsignor T offered me a lot of encouragement. He often said he thought a lot of me. I later realized he was saying he thought a lot about me. Father Principe, with his piercing stare and his peculiar twitches, taught religion. He also took boys with him to the movies on Saturday. His best student was Marty Scorsese. Then there's Father Jablonski, a.k.a. Jabo. Recruited by the Archdiocese of New York after World War II from the Waffen SS, he was the Dean of Mean. Father Jabo famously wrote in George Carlin's school record, "Mr. Carlin thinks he's a comedian." How prescient is that? Hayes was a landmark in a wasteland. For that reason, it attracted its share of famous visitors who'd come and stand amidst the rubble. Bobby Kennedy, for one, played touch football on the front lawn when he ran for Senate. The most notable visitor to Hayes was Pope John Paul II, who came with Mother Teresa. Not many schools get both the Pope and Mother Teresa. Well, actually, no other high school. But they were both in the neighborhood. When the Pope decided to stay over a night in New York, his advance team asked him what he'd like to do. See a show? Dine with the Cardinal? No, he said he'd like to see a school or visit a prison. They took him to Hayes. So there you have it. The Pope, Moses, the Promised Land. Can't get better than that, right? Wrong. How about the BVM in the NYC? Yeah, that's right. The Blessed Virgin Mary herself visit the Bronx not once but multiple times. She was spotted along the Grand Concourse by 10-year-old Joseph Vitolo. She'd appear nightly near the steps to his house. Word spread. As Taylor Swift says, haters are going to hate, believers will believe. Thousands flocked to the site, and over the years, Joe stuck to his story. Some 75 years later, pilgrims, although not many, continue to make their way to a makeshift shrine just off the concourse. And the Blessed Mother, as she is now known, Our Lady, Queen of the Universe, in keeping with her Jewish heritage, she is depicted with the golden Mogen David emblazoned on her blouse. Remember how Reverend Bush loved the Shema? Well, I love the Mogen David, the six-pointed shield of King David. And along with my devotion to Our Lady of the Grand Concourse, I promise that when I'm pastor, there'll be a lot more Mogen David around here. And not just on Communion Sundays. There's a Mogen David for every occasion. Coffee and conversation, Wednesday evening Bible study. What better gift from the alternative gift market than a bottle or two of Mad Dog 2020? So in closing, let's seriously consider my calling to pastor, UCC Valley Forge. I bring to the position a lifetime of religious devotion and deep personal connection to the divine. The only question that I think is left is, when do I start? I look forward to your answer.